Good morning, students. Today we are going to start chapter number 17, breathing and exchange of gases. In this chapter we will be studying following topic: 17.1 respiratory organs, mechanism of breathing, exchange of gases, transport of gases, regulation of respiration, disorders of respiratory system. We will start this chapter from respiratory organs, but before that let us introduce ourselves with the respiration and breathing. As we have read earlier that oxygen is utilized by the organisms indirectly to break down simple molecules like glucose, amino acid, fatty acid, etc. to derive energy from to perform various activities. Carbon dioxide, which is harmful, is also released during the above catabolic reactions. It is therefore evident that oxygen has to be continuously provided to the cell, and at the same time carbon dioxide produced by the cell have to be released out of the cell. This process of exchange of oxygen from the atmosphere with carbon dioxide produced by the cells is called breathing, which is commonly known as respiration. Place your hands on your chest. You can feel the chest moving up and down. You know that it is due to breathing. How do we breathe? We must wonder that how this process occurs, how the oxygen-rich air gets inside our body and how the carbon dioxide-rich air gets out of our body. The respiratory organs and the mechanism of breathing are described in the following sections of this chapter. Respiratory organs. Mechanism of breathing vary among different groups of animals depending mainly on their habitat and level of organization. Obviously, breathing in plant is different, breathing in human is different, breathing in cockroach is different, breathing in a frog is different. So there are so many different kinds of mechanism. Lower invertebrates like sponges, coelentrates, flatworms, etc. exchange oxygen with carbon dioxide by simple diffusion over their entire body surface. Earthworms use their moist cuticle, and insects have a network of tubes called tracheal tubes to transport atmospheric air within the body. Special vascularized structures called gills, that is bronchial respiration, are used by most of the aquatic arthropods and mollusks, whereas vascularized bags called lungs. Pulmonary respiration are used by terrestrial forms for the exchange of gases. Among vertebrates, fishes use gills, whereas amphibians, reptiles, birds and mammals respire through lungs. Amphibians like frogs can respire through their moist skin, that is known as cutaneous respiration. So these are the different kinds of respiration which the different animals exhibit. Human respiratory system. We have a pair of external nostrils opening out above the upper lips. It leads to the nasal chamber through the nasal passage. The nasal chamber opens into the pharynx, a portion of which is the common passage for food and air. The pharynx opens through the larynx region into the trachea. Larynx is a cartilaginous box which helps in sound production and hence called the sound box. During swallowing, glottis can be covered by a thin elastic cartilaginous flap called epiglottis to prevent the entry of food into the larynx. Trachea is a straight tube extending up to the mid-thoracic cavity, which divides at the level of fifth thoracic vertebra into right and left primary bronchi. Each bronchi undergoes repeated divisions to form the secondary and tertiary bronchi and bronchioles, ending up in very thin terminal bronchioles. The tracheae, primary, secondary and tertiary bronchi and initial bronchioles are supported by incomplete cartilaginous rings. Each terminal bronchiole give rise to a number of very thin, irregular walled and vascularized bag-like structures called alveoli. The branching Network of bronchi, bronchioles and alveoli comprise the lungs. We have two lungs which are covered by a double-layered pleura with pleural fluid between them. It reduces friction on the lung surface. The outer pleural membrane is in close contact with the thoracic lining, whereas the inner pleural membrane is in contact with the lung surface. The part starting with the external nostrils up to the terminal bronchioles constitute the conducting part. Conducting means सिर्फ transport के लिए useful, whereas the alveoli and their duct from the respiratory or exchange part of the respiratory system. Alveoli और उसकी ducts जो है वो main site है exchange of gases के लिए. The conducting part transports the atmospheric air to alveoli, clears it from foreign particle. Yes, it is the most important work of the conducting part कि उसमें से सारे फॉरेन पार्टिकल्स को जो है फिल्टर आउट कर दिया जाता है, उस एयर को थोड़ा ह्यूमिडिफाई कर दिया जाता है और उस एयर को बॉडी टेम्परेचर पर ला दिया जाता है. क्योंकि आपको पता है एटमॉस्फेरिक एयर का टेम्परेचर तो वेरी करता रहता है अकॉर्डिंग टू द weather or climate. Exchange part is the site of actual diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the blood and atmospheric air. Here is the diagrammatic view of human respiratory system, in which we can see from the epiglottis. Here larynx is there, then comes trachea. Ring-like structures are there over trachea. They are cartilaginous rings, half cartilaginous rings, which prevent trachea from collapsing. After this, the trachea divides into two branches, left and right, known as bronchus. Inside the lung, we will see that there are two pleural membranes, small round-like structures, sac-like structures, alveoli. Pleural fluid is filled in the pleural membrane, and the very thin branch attached to each alveoli is known as bronchiole. At the beneath of the lungs is a diaphragm that helps during the breathing mechanism. So these are the main important structures of the human respiratory system. The lungs are situated in the thoracic chamber, which is anatomically an airtight chamber. The thoracic chamber is formed dorsally and by the vertebral column, ventrally by the sternum, and laterally by the ribs. On the lower side by a dome-shaped diaphragm. The anatomical setup of the thoracic chamber of the lungs is such that any change in the volume of cavity will be reflected in the lung cavity known as pulmonary cavity. So there are two places, one outside the lungs known as thoracic cavity and one inside the lungs is known as pulmonary cavity. Both are connected to each other. Such an arrangement is essential for breathing as we cannot directly alter the pulmonary वॉल्यूम, क्योंकि हम डायरेक्टली लंग्स को स्क्वीज नहीं कर सकते, रिलैक्स नहीं कर सकते, तो हमें इनडायरेक्टली उसके बाहर वाले कैविटी की वॉल्यूम को चेंज करना पड़ता है. रेस्पिरेशन इन्वॉल्व्स द फॉलोइंग स्टेप्स. फर्स्ट, ब्रीदिंग और पल्मोनरी वेंटिलेशन बाय विच एटमॉस्फेरिक एयर इज ड्रॉन इन एंड कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड रिच alveolar air is released out. Diffusion of gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide across alveolar membrane. Transport of gases by the blood, diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between blood and tissues, utilization of oxygen by the cells for catabolic reaction and resultant release of carbon dioxide. This is known as cellular respiration, which we have already learnt in the chapter number 14.